by truly being profitable by having all of these other income streams so that you can do agriculture the way God intended, it frees you to really think differently about the way that you're going about things. And I think that's like another super powerful thing that you unlock, which is like through, the Bitcoin becoming your own bank, producing your own energy, like all of that, right? You have a level of optionality that most people don't ever have.
Welcome to the Bitcoin Business Podcast put on by Sovereign. I'm your host, Brandon Karpeles. Today I have with me a gentleman, Mark Smith, who is a founder and CEO, or co-founder and CEO of Carbon Country. And Mark is involved in something that I'm incredibly passionate about. Anyone who's listened to this podcast for any number of episodes knows my almost militant belief and adherence to quality food, going out, shaking your rancher's hands, regenerative farming, all this kind of stuff. So, without further ado, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, why don't we start with a little bit of your background and how you transitioned into what you're doing now and exactly what I always find it so fascinating. People on here, they're doing something just completely unrelated before, and I'll admit I cheated a little bit. I read a little bit of your bio. So why don't you tell our listeners what your brief bio here and what you're doing now?
Okay. Um, so I've been sort of a creature of Washington. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. Went to William and Mary in Georgetown for business school. After college, I took a look at myself and I was like, what do I uniquely have to offer the world? And the answer was that I spoke Portuguese. And so I had done a exchange program and actually was born in Brazil and whatever. And so I started out working as an intern at the Brazilian embassy in Washington. That led to a position at the Brazil U.S. Business Council as an assistant at the U.S. Chamber. And there I bounced back and forth between the chamber and the Brazilian embassy once, and then ultimately I became the managing director for Western Hemisphere Affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I had the pleasure of sort of being a part of all of the post-NAFTA free trade agreements. In Latin America, which was really exciting. We started with DR-CAFTA, which was the first after NAFTA, so it was really hard. I did like 99 editorial board meetings and flew with ambassadors all over the country and stuff like that. So it was really cool, like to get involved in all of those aspects. And then ultimately, and other cool things at the chamber. And while I was doing business school, we started a business actually putting up something on the web, and we got discovered by Barclays Commodity Group and went down this path to create this company called Clarion Power, which was focused on transforming medium-sized sugar mills and basically turning them from, producers of enough energy to run their internal operations to really like power plants that could power the surrounding rural area. And ultimately, my timing was like horrible. I created a business like that was, focused on bringing private equity money into these like special purpose vehicles in the energy space, and like right before the global financial crisis. And so it was like I had this $50 million Barclays Commodities Group like commitment, and like we were sitting like on the top of the like hotel at, in Copacabana, like making the deal with the managing director, and then it was like, you know, so I basically ended up eventually, we pivoted and developed a partnership with ED&F Man, which was really cool. They're the largest sugar and ethanol trader, and they saw that we were had been moving this idea sort of faster than they did, and they wanted to get in the space. So basically, ultimately, we ended up working for them on a consulting basis. They were like, "Hey, thank you very much." They cut our consulting business, and I was out of a job. So and that led to 12 and a half years at Clorox as the director for government affairs. Initially, basically creating the international government relations department from scratch, which was like really unique. And that, like, what other Fortune 500 company, that's in 115 or something, different international markets didn't have a government affairs. I mean, it was just mind boggling. And so obviously that was a really cool opportunity. And then I ended up taking on the both the Glad and the Brita brands, which were fascinating. So I helped develop the Brita municipal water business, which was a sort of passion project for me inside the company. And ultimately, my thank you for that was being laid off a week before Thanksgiving. Such is life these days, right?
What year
And
was that?
so
That would have
that
been like
23
23.
before
Okay, yeah,
Thanksgiving of 23.
yeah.
Yeah. And then I started thinking about things, and just, I got to the point where I was like, I really don't want to go back to corporate America. I just feel like the commitment is so one-sided these days. Like, I worked remotely for 11 years, spending half of my time in Oakland because I had to be there in person. And, the minute there's some sort of difficulty, it's like, oh, you know. So I decided that I wanted to start something new. So that's a very long background, but it gives you a little bit of context for the windy road that I've been on.
No, well, I love hearing it because, as I've talked about on this podcast before, that it's so interesting to hear everyone get to the same conclusion and then everyone's path be so completely different. Like, it's all there's something that happened in the past that was kind of a beginning point, a trigger point, if you will. Maybe something got unlocked in your brain, and then you kind of go on this journey and go on this path, and then at some point you just I was the same way where I was like, I just can't be in corporate America anymore. And I wasn't laid off, but I might as well have been the way I was treated in the kind of
Well,
final.
that's the other thing,
Yeah.
is that you can feel like so trapped too.
Yes.
Like that context as well, as like, the golden handcuffs, type thing. Sometimes it's not that golden, but for me it was that way.
No, I mean, I was a very nice salary, very nice benefits, but I mean, I would, after what had happened at the company and the way I was treated after, it was a bunch of different events that kind of crescendoed in one very large event. And I was just, I mean, I just looked at myself, not literally, but I was like, I'm basically just being paid to do what someone else wants. And am I willing to just sit here, have zero autonomy, zero control over what I'm doing for this paycheck? And I was like, that sounds like a deal with the devil. That that sounds like slavery. And I obviously had been looking to do something in the Bitcoin space for a very long time, but it the way people are treated and how many there's just so many people looking for the exit, and unfortunately it's you kind of, as Avi Burra said, who was my guest last week and does great work, that you built your own cage. Like, you have the key to your cage, and it's just whether you want to unlock
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. It's
And
like fear,
yes,
really,
yes,
and just like stagnation and comfort, and it's a very, when you get all these commitments, right? A house, kids, this, that, the other, it's like you get locked into these things and you're like, oh my God, like, if I did something, out of the, mold, like, I risk all of those all of those things. So you get yourself kind of, twisted up in a knot. And then, to break free of that and just say, you know what, like, let's go for it. It's scary as hell. Now, obviously, I was propelled into a situation where, like, it became more of a choice, right? Like, I was like, I didn't want it, but they they broke
Yeah.
me free. and
Yeah.
and like, I have been, I joked before that, like, you when you do your own business, like, because we had done our own business before, you kind of become a little feral,
Oh yeah.
like I right, and you're like, and I kind of operated that way, and it worked for me for a while, but on a couple of things, I went a little too feral in the corporate world, and they're like, you know
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that's
Big
too
time.
much honesty. Like,
Oh,
I
oh,
don't know why you're so passionate. Like, we already decided that, the corporate thing is that we're not going to do this or whatever. Like,
oh, of course.
um,
And then they tell you out of one side of their mouth, "We love your outside the box thinking," and then out of the other
right.
side of
But
the
you're
mouth, they go,
fired,
"Get back in the
thanks
box."
for creating that
Yeah.
new business line.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I really do associate with all of that.
Sorry, I a little derailed. It's just
Yeah,
cathartic.
good digression,
It's
right?
it's cathartic for me to talk about some of this stuff
Yeah.
because until you've actually lived it, and then until you've left, like we were talking before about the blue light glasses, and you made the
Mm-hmm.
comment that so most people probably don't even realize that they're being affected. And I said, yeah, it's until you put the glasses on, you have no idea like how much your eyes hurt, pain in the middle of your forehead, and then it goes away and you're like, holy cow, I've been living under all this stress and pain. And it's kind of like the same thing with the corporate job. Is like you don't
Absolutely.
realize how abused and how taken advantage, and how how much of your time was being stolen by someone else until you walk out of the system. And then it's like, oh my gosh, holy cow, what was I doing here? So
Yeah. There's
until
all
you've
these
actually
possibilities. Oh my God.
right, and until you've actually gone through it, you just don't understand what's being done to you, and the soullessness of what you're doing is. But okay, enough of that digression. So
On a lighter
uh,
note.
yeah, yeah, yes. Yeah, well, sometimes we got to get into philosophy and other
Yeah,
topics here. It can't be all nuts and
absolutely.
bolts. So, uh, okay, along those lines, circling back, so then you're let go from Clorox, and you are obviously you end up starting this farm and everything. So talk about how did you go from working in corporate America and convincing people to buy bleach to starting a regenerative farm?
Making the world safe for police. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. So I've been in the renewable energy space before, and it was something that I was, really interested in. And at the time when I failed, on Clarin Power, the other startup, it just ran out of money and had to get a day job. Um, the problem was I couldn't get a job in the energy space because I just didn't have the pedigree and the background there, even though, like, I had been a startup CEO and, whatever. And so I had to kind of, tack back. But I had always, we got some serious people involved in the stuff that we were working on, and we were very, very close. And so I'd sort of seen that and wanted to get back into that space. And so I'd seen some things in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, um, around, renewables on former mining sites. There were some big grants there, and so I started looking in, West Virginia. There's a authority that auctions off, abandoned mining sites, and so I was thinking about that. And that particular entity was closed until a particular date, and I couldn't get my mind around, like, the, liability, like, on all the ecological disaster that the mining sites had. Like, do you own that? Like, are you absolved of that? Like, if you buy it, like, how does that work, right? And so I had a buddy who, my son plays youth soccer, and we sit next to each other for like an hour and a half, and I was like, who does like utility solar, and I was like, hey man, Barry, like, how many acres do you need to do 5 megawatts of solar? And it's like, yeah, Mark, you need about 25 acres. So I started just looking for 25-acre plots in West Virginia. And I found all these ranches. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, I didn't know, first of all, that cattle ranching is the number one agricultural activity in West Virginia. Like, that was a new one for me.
Yeah,
And
that's
then when I went to the ranch,
I wouldn't have guessed that either. Yeah, that's
yeah.
surprising actually.
So anyway, so I went, and then I started looking at ranches, and I was like, oh my God, these are beautiful, first of all. And they have exactly what I need in terms of the acreage and flat space. They're affordable. They're in areas that make sense. And so I went out and I looked at this one particular ranch. It was like $1.3 million or something. It was like in this valley in West Virginia. And that ranch had cattle that were grazing. And so I, talked to the real estate agent. And I was like, hey man, like, how much do you make, like, having a tenant farmer like graze cattle on your land? He was like, oh Mark, you make like $3,000 a year. And I was like, what? Seriously? That's crazy. Like, that makes no sense. And so I started thinking about like the livestock, and I discovered agrivoltaics, and I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, this makes a lot more sense. We're doing vegetation management. Like, we're actually, like, the panels are benefiting the livestock, and the livestock are taking care of the panels, etc. This is really cool. It's a much better way. And then that same property had this wooded area, and I
Oh,
I had done some stuff on basically like wood pellets in Kenya for to replace like heavy oil boilers. And so I knew a little bit about the forestry sector and some ideas there. And I was thinking about like soil health in the context of the agrivoltaics and the rotational grazing of sheep. Obviously, I mentioned the regenerative agriculture stuff, and I know you're into that. And so I started thinking about the soil and the forest, and I was like, huh, like, I wonder what we can do there. And then boom, I found like biochar as I was thinking about soil carbon and all that, and I was like, whoa, wait a second. Like, imagine if we take this property and then we stack all of these things together with, like, maximizing, like, for my government affairs mind, like, maximizing every single possible incentive and tax break, right, like, to make this work. And um and then you know and then what if, like, this is the solution for saving family farms? Like, what if, like, connecting this really cool business idea then to this kind of, because I'm in a place where, like, I mentioned that, like, the lead and water, like, that was really, like, important to me, like, and I was also, like, making money for the company, but, like, I want to work on big things that, like, actually meaningful. And so, like, when I found this when I kind of had this brainstorming about this, business strategy, I was also like, wow, this connects with everything that's happening in agriculture in the United States. And, like, what if this could be a pathway for farmers basically to save the smallholder farms? And so that's basically how Carbon Country was born.
so why don't you explain real quick for others what agrivoltaics is, just so
Yeah,
people
so
know what
so
we're talking about.
agrivoltaics is basically, dual land use. So you are building solar in a way with agriculture in mind. So like a traditional solar field, they're not really that pressed about, like, what's happening with the soil. You'll see these huge canyons of, like,
Quite the opposite,
erosion and
actually,
stuff like
right?
that.
Yeah,
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 it's
they're
ugly. It's
destroying the land.
denuded. Like, it's really bad. And I think that's one of the reasons why the solar industry, like, is in the position that they are from, a community love perspective. You know what I mean? And but like an agrivoltaic setup, you're like, for in our case, we're grazing sheep underneath the panels. So we're our interest is to make sure that we have a really vibrant and productive pasture at the same time. So we're focused on building our energy system in a way that has agriculture in mind first. So like we have 15 feet between the rows of our panels, so you could drive a tractor down the middle. Um, they're of a height that the sheep can easily like fit under and move under. um and we're also you know we're using the land. I mean, we're it's an active pasture. We're grazing sheep in a rotational fashion, so we create small paddocks, with the panels included. And then we move the sheep every 5 days, so we graze intensively. And the poop and the hooves drives the root systems deeper. It fixes carbon, obviously fertilizes the area, and then they move on, and we rest that area for 30 days. And over time, that has an incredible regenerative effect on the soil. And what's cool is that like we did a soil sampling in the beginning, so we're going to be able to see like before and after. But the whole idea of agrivoltaics, just getting back to a very simple answer, is like dual use, dual land use, so agriculture uh, um, with energy, with the primacy of the ag working in mind.
Awesome. So do you have anything other than sheep grazing on the property? Do you still have the cattle there or anything else?
Right now we don't, but like I've had my eye on these dwarf African goats. So like I'm pretty excited about getting some goats here. So that's probably the next like animal addition.
So are the sheep? Oh,
Cattle I think is really interesting, but like you need a lot more land.
yeah, okay. So in terms of the sheep, and then if you bring the goats in and that stuff, are you harvesting for milk and the wool, or are you butchering the animals? What's kind of the overall? Is it they're just grazing to keep the land stable? What's kind of the overall vision and plan for everything you're doing here?
So yeah, we're really serious about the agricultural side as well. The idea is that, and just to mention that we're not having the goats together with our solar, because the goats, they would eat the
Oh
wires, they
yeah,
would
oh
jump
yeah,
on the solar, like
yep.
they're like little
They don't mess
bandits.
around. Yeah.
So they're gonna go in a different place. But anyway, um, the the idea is that we keep the ewes, and they're constantly we're sort of trying to select for ewes that will deliver triplets, or at least twins. And that way we're doubling our flock every year. We started with 23 ewes, and now we've basically doubled to some around 50. We're harvesting the rams, and so once they get to a certain weight, we'll sell them to a halal distributor. And we're actually looking at potentially doing something together with local mosques around Eid, and sort of kind of thing where people would buy the sheep in advance. And they have a really cool tradition where they slaughter the sheep together with their family. It's like a big event. They take a third, they give a third to their friends, and then they give a third to charity. And so we're interested in developing that ethnic market. My wife is from Kenya, and they love goats. So like there's these interesting sort of value added markets, both from like Africans have immigrated in the United States, and just other cultures that like sheep and goats better than beef. And so we're looking to develop that, and then constantly work to improve the parasite resistance and the quality of our flock by kind of selective breeding and stuff like that. So so yeah, we're serious about the agriculture side.
Yeah, I love all those animals, by the way. If you haven't had goat or sheep, people are sleeping on that. And trust me, I get a whole cow every year. I love the beef. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
and
But
like the difference between a grass-fed and finished cow,
oh,
not a
yes.
cow that, has been finished in a feedlot, or, grass-fed by being in a barn and having grass.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Or they give it one bite of
you
grass and
taste. Yeah.
yeah. Yes. Oh, the taste, the meat quality
And,
is
and the
just
new and the more important thing is the nutritional density.
yes.
I mean, really, the like nutritional profile of like something that's free range and live like that versus like, it's like night and day.
Yeah, you need less food to feel full because your body's getting all the nutrients it needs, and the organ meat from these things, I mean, is so rich and so dense. It's actually kind of a lot. It's small portions are about all I can handle of the organ meat, just because it's so intense. It's so nutrient dense and so filling. So, um, okay, so along those lines, we have I know you're just getting started here and everything with the farm. So we have the sheep. We're selling some of the rams off there. We have the solar farm. Because this is a business podcast, what's sort of the business model and for for everything you have going on there, and maybe this can lead into to the Bitcoin portion of this as well. So
Absolutely. So the idea is essentially, it's basically a real estate idea at its core, or at least the foundation is a real estate idea. And so we're targeting, buying our farms in areas where, um, there is a up to 60% investment tax credit available. So we will be, stacking, and so stacking is the theme. I guess the business model, like if you were to like completely just sort of like synthesize all of this into one word, it would be stacking. And so, but the base of the stack is like massively tax advantaged real estate. So we're looking for, a farm that is in a, quote unquote energy community from the investment, tax credit perspective. So that's a census district or an adjoining census district that had a thermal power plant that was closed, generally a coal, fired, power plant, or a coal mine that has been shuttered. So, in our case, it's a thermal power plant. And then low income communities. So we're looking at, areas where there's a certain, the income is below the average in the state, and there's a higher level of unemployment. So that's another 10% adder. Um, so first of all, the tax advantage real estate. Now, if you can, if you wanted to get greedy, and like we're definitely thinking about this, is like if we were able to also stack opportunity zones, and particularly a rural opportunity zone, that would be amazing. So that's like on the, you know, our dream map.
expansion map, yeah.
But yeah. But anyway, so tax advantage real estate, right? And then we think we found a sort of disruption in the force, with the smallholder farms. So like under 100 acres, because they don't have the scale for just the same reasons why they're going out of business, they're also very affordable. And so, you know, under 100 acres, like we're buying farms, in the DC area, undeveloped, like $6,000 an acre, developed $8,000 an acre, and so, that is also a sort of economic decision that we're making in terms of how we generate the returns, right? So a really low basis on the land. In our case, we're using seller financing. So, um, that's helping, and then we're trying to, you know, negotiate our rates in a way that we have a low cost basis. So that's the real estate, angle. And then, I mentioned the farming side, so that farming is going on. We're looking to use the USDA benefits for farmers, the USDA privilege financing, grants, etc. So we're the farming, and then also we're lowering our tax bases because it's agricultural land. Then we're layering solar in an agrivoltaic setup that accommodates and prioritizes the agriculture. So there, we're maximizing both the federal ITC. So you can imagine, like, when we're building a project, we're getting a 60% ITC. So that's basically paid when the project is complete. So let's say that the project takes like a year or maybe 2 years. After that, you're basically getting 60% of the total cost of the project back and a tax credit that you can then transfer and sell at 88 cents on the dollar. So you're really pulling a massive portion of your cash flow, like, really early on in the business, which generates a really, really high IRR. And then we're stacking also state incentives. So, like, in the case of the stuff that we're building initially, we're able to bring in our case, Maryland commercial solar grants, which are like 20% grants on top of the 60% ITC. So we basically, like, when we build the solar, we've paid off 80% of the total capex. And so then we're looking at basically using subsidized financing. So in this case, CPACE or other long-term financing to over 20. CPACE is a 20-year loan. So we're taking that payment down and using subsidized loans. And so that, again, it's super capital efficient. So that's the solar side. And then, the idea is that we're building these in clusters. So in, like, the central cluster will have a biochar facility, and there we're basically, we're buying a pyrolysis reactor or multiple pyrolysis reactors in the case of our first project. We're taking wood chips, which are a forestry residue, not a waste, and then we're subjecting it to high heat, not burning it, between 500 to 700 degrees Celsius, and converting it into a 90% carbon soil amendment that's been endorsed by the USDA, Maryland, and Virginia as a soil conservation practice. So really, we're doing a value-added agricultural process to take a sort of residue, a problem, all these wood chips from land clearing, from tree care experts, from our county mulch facility, where a lot of these things are deposited by residents, and turning it into something that makes the land 20% more productive, that has surface area that is, bringing water and retaining water, etc. So we're able to sell the physical biochar. We're modeling $250 a ton, and we're sizing the facility so that we can take 30,000 tons of wood chips and produce 6,000 tons of biochar. That way, we're at the size where we can clip the miscellaneous 45Q credit, which is an additional $75 on the carbon credits that we're generating by creating the biochar. So these are specific carbon removal credits, which are much more valuable than the avoidance credits. And those are selling somewhere around $150. So we can add another 75. That's 225, which is pretty sizable. And then we're leveraging the waste heat from the biochar facility to generate baseload power using organic Rankine cycle system. And so we'll be able to produce about a half a megawatt of baseload power from the size that we're building on our pilot facility. And so you have three income streams there. And then, most relevant and last but certainly not least for our podcast, right? We're doing really cool things behind the grid. So like with that energy ecosystem, so we have the baseload power from the biochar, and then we have the intermittent power from the solar. Behind the meter, we have Bitcoin mining, right? So and battery storage. So if you think about it, basically we're creating a system where we can arbitrage um, Bitcoin price, um, energy, peak power, non-peak power, uh, and um, at any time of the day. So like, we can switch between bringing our energy to our battery, to mining Bitcoin, to selling it to the grid, and then we can make it. The idea is to use AI to help us make a decision on a moment to moment basis as to where we should be dispatching our power, and really sort of use that to maximize our IRR. And the other thing that's really cool about the Bitcoin is that like where we are, we're able to do something called net metering. And net metering is basically you're able to, if you're producing more energy than you consume, you're able to sell that energy back to the grid for the same price that you're consuming it. So if you think about
Yeah.
it, and so for us, right, like if we're able to sell our energy at retail, that price is over 2 times the price that we would get for a commercial PPA, power purchase agreement, pardon the acronym. And so we're able to sell our energy for a higher price. Um, and and then the caveat on the net metering is that we can net meter up to 2 megawatts, which is a lot, but we can only net meter twice what we consume. So we're basically using the base load consumption of the Bitcoin mining to generate the load that allows us to monetize our energy at over twice the price, and then have basically, and I think the most important part about the business model is if you believe like I do that our energy prices are going to go fucking crazy, um and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to
Well, yeah.
understand that. I mean,
As
the Iran war hasn't helped any, but like
yeah.
even before that, you want exposure to retail energy rates, and that is what we're doing. So like a traditional energy PPA will have like a 3% inflator. So even though the energy rates are going crazy, if you sign that 10-year PPA, you're getting 3 when inflation could be 20. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So like, if just to summarize, we've got agriculture, we've got Bitcoin, we've got physical biochar, we've got carbon dioxide removal credits, and we've got renewable energy sales, and then we've got renewable energy credits. So if you take all of those together, like you have these like naturally diversified, uncorrelated assets in income streams that are being generated from like a tax efficient vehicle. Um, and then the idea is to pull all of them into a REIT such that we can um, share the income that is created in a tax efficient way with our investors and give them a way to exit. So that's the business model.
Wow, that's quite impressive. I don't want to say complex, but it's very layered. It's got
It is. And so the
yeah,
downside is they're like, Mark, just shut up. Just say that you're just, you're going to do this one thing or whatever. Like, no, the idea is that like once you get a hold of this asset, you could do all these things, right? So
yeah. It's much more. So when you're heating the biochar, are you just lighting a fire for that, or are you using the solar panels, or how's the biochar
we are
heat?
going to power it with the solar, which is cool.
Yeah.
It takes about 100 kilowatts of load to run it. So we can defray that consumption, you know, during the sunny time of the day, right? But we can't, and also potentially with batteries. Um, but really the way that you start it is you use propane, and then you get the system started, and then basically it fuels itself with the off gases that come out of the wood, and so it's sort of self-perpetuating, and that makes it also pretty efficient and cool.
Are you familiar with the online? He's on Nostr at Nunya Business. His name's David Bennett. Are you
No.
familiar? Okay, you should look him up. You should check him out. He wrote a whole piece on biochar and robots basically having biochar backpacks that would propel themselves to collect the stuff you're talking about, the driftwood, the mulch, all this stuff that's not being used, put it in their own little heater, heat it, have the biochar, and then the excess that's not powering the robot that's picking this stuff up would go to Bitcoin mining. And so it's kind of a
It's awesome.
fantastic, it's really, really cool. It's definitely a
Oh my god.
fantastical idea. He has some
Dude, let's
economics
build it, man.
and some other things to work through, but you should check out his work. Yeah, his name's Nunya,
That's crazy.
Nunya Bidness on Nostr, and he does the Bitcoin and podcast. And
I love
so
it.
if you're interested, definitely check him out. And he's doing a lot of stuff with biochar, thinking
Wow.
about biochar. He's a homesteader. What's the word I'm looking for? Man, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on it.
Survivalist or something?
Yeah, not a survivalist, but there's a there,
Prepper?
no, not a prepper. There's a permaculture. He's a big
Oh,
permaculture guy.
permaculture. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, yeah. I don't know why I was drawing a
Oh, that's
blank on
cool.
that,
Well,
but
I think
yeah,
that has a lot, that and regenerative agriculture are,
for sure.
there are a lot of they're swimming in the same lane. No, that's really cool. I mean, I'm pretty excited about biochar, and I think as a soil amendment is a start, and it has some really cool. I think the water retention may end up being the coolest aspect of it. No, obviously the productivity is really awesome as well, and we're looking at combining it with compost, so to have compost inoculated biochar, because if you put pure biochar, it has such a big surface area, it's like sucking up all of the nutrients initially, and so like your productivity kind of goes like, and then it goes.
Yeah,
So but like if you have the compost, you're just like, you know
flying.
so
Yeah,
so I think that's a really cool addition as well. And like, but like you can do like battery cathodes, like people are looking at biochar for that. There's some really cool applications there. I'm particularly excited about the water filtration. So I was looking at some really cool you know I guess you would call like the kinds of biochar. There was one that was from chicken litter that was shown to filter PFAS for stormwater. And you know so there's a lot of really interesting sort of additional value add. And then you could think about like heavy metals as well. It'll take heavy metals out. So if you have like a condemned piece of land that has like you think about like a military base or something like that, you could basically use biochar to bring the land back and be able to soak up a lot of the nasty things. So I think there's a lot of really cool additional applications, beyond the soil one. But we're targeting farmers and the kind of biomix that's used for stormwater management. At the county and municipal level first, and then we want to kind of go from there.
well, how about even insulating us from all the crap they're spraying in our skies and everything? They've done soil tests after these planes go by, and there's increased aluminum and barium and strontium and all this crap. And imagine if we could have like a protective layer of this effectively waste material that is otherwise just going to be thrown away, or worst case, causes problems, causes forest fires to accelerate and to destroy even more property. And imagine if we could use that as a
I mean,
defense
when I
shield.
was looking at like water for Brita, I mean, dude, man, filter your freaking water, man.
Oh,
I'm
I know.
telling you, like it, and particularly if you're living in a city, man, like
Yes.
so, and then all the agricultural chemicals and stuff like that. If you're in a rural area, you really gotta be careful. So like I had my eyes open, and it's like whether it's the soil or the air or whatever, like the more the more you're like, oh my God.
It's actually shocking
Not to
that,
like
yeah.
get like overly, but like I think
No,
you
it's,
do need to be aware,
I
and
mean,
there
it's
are
happening.
a lot. The
It's,
cool.
there are chemicals and additives and all sorts of different stuff in our soil, our water, and all sorts of different things that are clearly affecting us, probably in ways we haven't even figured out yet. Just you were commenting on how important that is, and everyone should do that. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And here we are like enjoying this conversation, going off on all these crazy tangents and
well, that's why
but
we're
I
enjoying the
do think
conversation.
I think it's a cool aspect. There are a lot of really interesting things that you can do with biochar on that space. And um, one of the big problems with agriculture is, for example, like people were putting biosolids as a fertilizer on land and not realizing they were basically like infecting their land with PFAS. And so, like, if we could use biochar to be able to bring those lands back um, to a safe place where they can be productive again, I mean, that would be just like a majorly cool application of what we're producing, you know?
Well, I have a question, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but is this just a problem endemic in the United States, or are other nations doing this? Do you know?
You mean biochar?
No, I mean the
Or
problems that biochar solves.
no. So the thing is, like, we're actually probably in a much better position than, given all of the environmental regulation that we have and stuff like that. Like, it's all relative, right? I mean, obviously, we do have areas that are make people very sick, and but like overall, if you were to compare our air, our water, to our certainly to like more like China, for example, or India, for example. I mean, we're living like kings.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So, and then if the really poor areas of the developing world where they're like, the video you've seen of people like recycling, quote unquote, like where they're just like sitting there burning all this stuff with mercury and everything. Like, I mean, there's just like awful stuff that's going, like some of the, the like illegal mining and stuff that goes on.
sure.
So there's, we're relatively speaking, not that we're out of the woods or anything like that, but like relatively speaking, these are all massive problems all over the globe, and that's what I think is really cool about all of these things, and this business model in particular is that like the same problems that we have here also apply all over the world in terms of like small and medium-sized farms that are struggling, and the need for energy, some of these environmental issues that we mentioned, like the opportunity, like if you can create your own energy to be your own bank, like all of these things are applicable like globally.
Yeah, and so what I love about what you're talking about, and in other places they're not going to get the subsidies or the tax benefits or things like that, and that's obviously of no concern. But is this model scalable to other parts of the world to self-sustaining? Yes, I understand there's a capex cost and an upfront cost. Assuming someone could source the capital, get investors, is this something that's scalable to anywhere in the world?
Absolutely. Now, I think that obviously we're taking advantage of a lot of like very specific federal and state level tax incentives
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So obviously, but I think that and so you need to make sure that like all the economics work. You need to be able to sell to the grid. You need to have access to the grid. Obviously, a lot of this you can kind of do behind the grid. And I think there's some like microgrid applications that could be, equally, if not more interesting, where you could power I've been thinking about like, could we basically like power a city like this, like build our own community where we would basically self-power, and then we'd have all these things. Like you can imagine like community that has, you know, their own energy, their own bank that they've created, their own like food, So there's some really cool kind of applications that you can think about. But I think it's important to localize it and make sure that it works for the local context. But I think within that constraint, that this is a global opportunity.
Well, that's exactly where I was going with this
Hmm.
is how do we get to, not necessarily how do we, but we have the potential to start building communities that are self-sustaining, that are
Absolutely.
able to be sufficient, and maybe we're not selling power back to the grid necessarily or something like that, but it's kind of like, okay, that part of the stack is removed. Now we're handling everything else on our own. And to me that's what's super exciting and super cool about this setup, is that with the right amount of people, and it will require some capital, but Bitcoiners have capital, and as the price of Bitcoin continues to go up, they'll just have more and more capital, and the ability to take something like this and do it on 5 or 6 adjacent lots and kind of build out a more than just kind of this citadel concept of you have a castle in your bunker, but it's actually growing a community on adjacent
Well,
parcels of land and
well,
stuff.
that's the exciting thing, right? Is that like, and that's why we love and we're fighting for the ability to do all of this as a community solar project, right? So under 5 megawatts in Maryland, as a community solar project, you can basically you can create your own group of customers. And so we want to do that in the very low income communities where our farms are, which are struggling, man. Like I volunteer at one of the local churches, and man, the line of people at the food pantry every week is very long, and people. And so if like you think about like people's like the cost that you just can't like not have, like electricity is really one of the last ones that you would cut, like if you were struggling. And those costs have been, going up on a double digit basis. So like where we are last year, our energy costs went up 17%. And so under community solar, you can basically create your own customer base. So you can go and recruit your own. And so what we would like to do is use the church and other community organizations to help recruit people in our own community. And then under community solar, like low income consumers get 20% discount on their electricity, and medium income 10%. So we benefit by being able to be fully exposed to retail prices and selling at a higher price, and then we can provide the members of our community a benefit, and helping them deal with some of these like really difficult inflationary costs, and that hit particularly hard for people that are on the lower income part of the pyramid, which is our neighbors. And so um, I think that's a really powerful, like thinking about all the community aspect of like what you're doing. And so like not only that, but like we're creating really good jobs in a rural area. We're doing it in a radically carbon negative way. We're providing renewable energy to the community, a community that where we are that's growing very quickly and doesn't have the necessary infrastructure to support that. So we're supporting all of the energy necessary to grow the community economically. And then we're doing it in a radically sustainable way, and then preserving farmland as a farm, versus where it's going, which is pretty much housing. So I think that's a really powerful way to not only make a buck, but like leave a legacy and create a really powerful impact on the community, you know?
Well, and this is also one of those things where it's like once you have the blueprint, now someone else can do it, you know? So
Well, and
it,
so that's one of the things that we're really excited about too. So I'm in the process of setting up a 501c3 called the a Center for Small Farm Resilience, where we basically can provide other farmers with tools so that they can localize and evaluate these opportunities for themselves and apply it in a way that makes sense. Like not everybody's going to be as crazy as me and like want to build this thing themselves, right? Like
yeah.
some people are going to want to bring a developer in or whatever, but at least they can make a educated decision about what their options are and then like how to basically execute it. So that's something that we're excited about providing to the community as a tool so that they can iterate themselves.
I know you were talking earlier. That's awesome, by the way. That's fantastic. And that's exactly what we need is more people taking what's working for them, explaining how other people can do it, and it being it being scalable because the incentives are there and the math and economics work. And so along those lines, is there a size of farm that you kind of don't want to go over or don't want to go under? What's the square footage or acreage, I guess
Yeah,
probably would be better
yeah,
term.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, we're looking to be able to do enough energy to have some sort of scale, so to be the lower end of the utility scale solar. So that's 5 megawatts, as I mentioned, like 25 flat acres that were cleared pasture that you could clear, where you could do I mean preferably you wouldn't clear, but like that you could do this on. So I would say that you'd need probably at least like and 30 acres or something like that. Obviously the top end it can be infinite. But we're really focused on farms that are under 100 acres because we think that those are particularly threatened. Now, the USDA defines small farms as under 500 acres, which just shows you the scale of things. But like under 100 acres, like in states like us, like Maryland, that's the vast majority of farms. There are a couple of like really, really big ones, and if you're doing like row crops and stuff like that, you do need scale. But like for a small farm to be 500, that's kind of like Iowa stuff.
Yeah, well, and then you say it's infinitely scaling, but then you get all the things that come with it, right? You need more labor, you need more potential
Of course,
housing in the
of
area or
course.
where people live and all that good stuff. So,
And so for our model, like to really keep the land a small percentage of the overall build and that sort of stuff, like and affordable. We're looking at sub 100 acres.
yeah, that seems to me to be much more manageable. I just personally, I mean, I have absolutely zero qualifications on any of this stuff, but it would seem to me that you start getting past that 100 acres or so, and that just becomes a whole different animal that you're dealing with at that point. And it seems like it's one of those things where as you scale, you kind of lose focus and you're not able to be as attentive to all the stuff that matters as you want to be. And I'm sure there's some level of delegation and just finding the right person, but that's just a whole separate set of headaches and a whole different amount of work and a different type of work that
Yeah, I
maybe a
mean
lot of people avoid.
there are powerful scale economics like in solar and stuff like that. So like, there's that. But as you mentioned, like, once you start getting into this huge operation, it's really another ball of wax. So, and you may give up because all of this stuff is viable for industrial agriculture. You don't have the same discount on the land that you would if you were doing something that people right now can't really make any money doing.
Awesome. So I think I'm doing some quick math here. I think we've gone about an hour. But anything else you want to get to before we wrap up here?
Yeah, no, the only other thing, and we've talked about so many other fascinating topics, so I did want to throw some additional Bitcoin goodness in there, and I think,
Let's do it.
our focus is really what we believe is that, particularly for these small farms, but even larger farms, that like dual land use really makes sense. So agrivoltaics is a powerful way to preserve and keep farms farming. And because like any amount of subsidy is not comparable to a farm actually being economically viable and profitable. And when you have a profitable farm, it stays a farm. And so, the other compelling aspect of the Bitcoin mining that we're doing, not only allowing us to sell our energy for more, to be able to sell it through net metering, et cetera, is that we're generating digital assets. So we're basically minting digital assets that we can, over time, basically become our own bank. So use those assets through DeFi to be able to generate working capital loans and substitute the traditional financial providers that will be happy to take the farm when you have that bad year for basically being your own bank. And so if you think about the power of having a productive farm, being your own bank, producing your own digital assets that are that are a way to protect yourself from the dollar debasement. All of that is a really powerful, I think, way forward for farming, and I just wanted to kind of bring all those pieces together for your viewers.
Yeah, hopefully all those digital assets are Bitcoin, but yeah,
There you go. So in our case, they are.
good, good. Well, that's what we like to hear. So, and then one other thing you kind of got me thinking about it is this idea of multi-use operations on the land. And I can't help but think back to 1971, going off the gold standard, the subsidizing of corn and everything like that, and all sorts of other crops. And it seems intuitive to me. Just, I mean, everyone's seen the monocropping and stripping our soils of all the nutrients and all these other problems that we know exist. It seems to me that along with that, we've stripped out the old school, not old school, but traditional ways of farming and multi-use of the land to make it single use. So like here's one more thing fiat has destroyed is agrivoltaics as well. Do you think that's true, or am I just trying
Yeah,
to?
no, I think that like that's the whole regenerative agriculture movement is like going back actually to practices that we were doing a long time ago when we were better stewards of the soil and we were not trying to you know create a factory farm that was maximized for output. And I think like we've lost sight of our ways sometimes. Obviously there's tremendous benefits to being able to feed the world and this and that and the other, provide all of those calories, et cetera, like at the level of scale. And that's really what we were focused on, right? And we kind of achieved that. But in the rush to do that, we've lost our way on the nutritional value, on the stewardship of the land, on the fossil fuel based fertilizer use and all that kind of stuff. So it's like going back to more traditional practices where we're kind of rotating things. We're doing, it's like we like there's like really cool stuff with the rotational stuff where you can basically bring different animals across that same period of land, and each one of them provides a benefit or takes something away. So like after the sheep leave, you bring the chicken in, and they
Yep.
poop also, but they eat the all the things that grew on the poop of the sheep. And it's like the multiple layers of use and rotating things through a particular area, not focusing intensively on like doing one thing. I think all of that is powerful.
Absolutely. And just
Oh man, I just lost you again.
no, Mark, you there? I can hear
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, I was just gonna say that um as all this focus has gone into a single thing on these farms, you said, we're maximizing for output, but really we're maximizing for short-term output. And that's just created a whole negative feedback loop of what we're getting. And then obviously, when you don't have hard money, it makes it very, very difficult for these farms to be able to keep up and do this multi-use and be better stewards of the land because they have a mortgage to pay or a tractor to pay off and all the problems that come with an inflationary environment. So they're kind of getting double whacked in that they've been incentivized to do one thing and their money is getting destroyed, and that ultimately just leads to this outcome where everything centralizes and you have to focus on one thing instead of utilizing the land for everything it's meant to be used for. So,
Well, when you can break out of there's a number of sort of oligarchies or monopolies that are controlling agriculture, right? So number one is all the incentives from the government. You have to do X to get, this particular incentive, and if you don't do it this way or that way, or right? So the government is telling you a particular way that's based on this, you know I think, they're making some changes and stuff, but a lot of it's focused on let's just produce, produce, produce. And then, then if you're like producing like chicks or something like that, or chickens for a chicken company, they're giving you that chick. They're giving you the feed. They are, you're paying them for all of that, and then they're paying you a particular price. So they're controlling you from that perspective, as well. And then, you think about like all of those things. When you break those chains by truly being profitable, by having all of these other income streams so that you can do agriculture the way God intended, right? Like it frees you to really think differently about the way that you're going about things. And I think that's like another super powerful thing that you unlock, which is like through, the Bitcoin becoming your own bank, producing your own energy, like all of that, right? You really become, you have a level of optionality that most people don't ever have.
well, I think that's
And
a
that's incredibly powerful.
yes, I think that's a perfect point to end it on because that's exactly how we started this conversation. And it's whether you're leaving the corporate world to go work for yourself or you're leaving the current system of rural farming, or not even rural farming, just farming in general, to leave to another system where you're in control of everything. The underlying theme remains the same, that as you have control over your life, as you aren't outsourcing or being subsidized by someone else, all of a sudden you can make much better decisions. You will feel much better, you'll be healthier, and you're going to be doing something where your stress level is way down, even though the work's difficult and things are going to be, it's different
It
because
matters.
it does. And it's a different kind of, you know it's a different kind of stress when you're putting the pressure on yourself and you're in charge of succeeding, as opposed to just effectively being, you know, pejor or proverbially whipped by someone else into what you have to do. So
Just a pawn, right, in somebody else's game
exactly.
that's generating some sort of pat- piece of somebody's net income that,
Yes.
whatever. So I think there's a lot in that. And like if we can achieve that, that's the vision. And that's the brass ring that we're grasping for here in terms of like building this. And I think, um It's tough, and like I'll be lying to you if I don't wake up at 4 in the morning, like going, I didn't do this or I had to do that or whatever, like in the process of building all of this. But like if we get to that promised land, man, and we're able to execute on this vision, like I think and being able to create something that we can share with others so that they can iterate and have their own sort of create their own freedom that way. Like I think it'd be just incredibly powerful, not only like on an individual level, but a community level, and then hopefully on a national and international level as well. And so that's the vision, that's the dream, and we're just building brick by brick and trying to create the sort of initial prototype, then and go from there.
It's just like we're doing at Sovereign, we're just doing it for businesses. And so get them financially autonomous and having control of their finances and their money. And it's hard out on the frontier. It's tough, but to your point, we're at the very, very beginning here. We're starting to lay some of the first bricks. I mean, I would argue that people, maybe not now, but certainly in the last decade or so, are the ones laying the cornerstone. And we're just so early. And it's going to be very difficult to see what the structure is going to look like. But it's happening, it's starting. And if not us, then who? Someone's got to do the building. And so why not us?
Amen.
All right, brother. Well, where can we send people to learn more about Carbon Country? The website, I believe it's carboncountry.org. Is that correct?
It's carboncountry.us.
.us. Sorry, I knew it wasn't
Yeah, and
.com. All right.
and we've also got if you want to participate, we've got we're raising money for our second solar phase on Climatize. So if you go to take a look at Climatize, our projects on there, it's a juicy rate of income. If you look at our LinkedIn, there's a referral code, gives you $50, which is pretty cool. And we're paying 9.5% interest. So they get some nice interest on that $50 over 5 years. I think it's $23 I calculated. So
Nice.
go and grab the $50 at least, man. Like, and we want to make sure the idea is to democratize finances as well. And so like the way that we're raising money for what we're doing is in that vein as well. So we'd love for people to participate. You could do even $10, like, it's available. And so we want to make sure, please only invest what you're comfortable with. But like, if there's, you have an opportunity to play a part and support this vision, and, we'd love to have you along for the journey. So thank you for that.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm looking on the website, carboncountry.us at the bottom. It's got your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your email, your partner's email. So is that probably just the best place for people to
Yeah,
go
we'd
to?
love to hear from you. Love to collaborate with you. Love to have you as an investor or a lender. And if you're as excited about these ideas as we are, I'm sure there's some way that we can collaborate and partner. If only to come and pay us a visit and pet the doggies or see the sheep.
Well, I know some permaculture folks, some homesteaders listen to this podcast. So if you guys want to reach out, check out carboncountry.us and reach out to Mark or his partner, Josh. So, Mark, thank you so much for coming on. As always, this is the Bitcoin Business Podcast put on by Sovereign. I'm Brandon Karpeles. You can find me personally on LinkedIn, on Plebe, Anon, on Noster, but the best place to get a hold of us is just the website, sovreign.io. You can get a hold of anyone on there and we'll get back to you, I promise. So, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. Love the chat and have a good one.
All right, take it easy.
Thanks.